Right, so war is referred to as a theatre, isn't it? The theatre of war. And if this is true, then Benjamin Netanyahu is preparing for his next act on the big stage, also known as Washington, D.C., with Donald Trump apparently having been cast as both co-star and co-conspirator. While most world leaders seek diplomacy behind closed doors, Netanyahu appears to be auditioning for the role of regional arsonist, reportedly jetting off to secure Trump's permission to strike Iran. Again. As if last month's US-Israeli airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities weren't destabilising enough, now apparently comes Act 2, aka the Bunker Buster Act, a bipartisan congressional proposal that would hand Israel B-2 stealth bombers and the bunker-busting bombs the US used on Iran's nuclear research centres. And the last person on earth right now you'd want such munitions put in the hands of surely would be Benjamin Netanyahu's. What begins as a handshake and a headline could soon become the trigger for a return to another catastrophic war in the Middle East between Israel and Iran, with all the instability that comes with that. One far worse than what we saw last month. And the world, once again, appears willing to watch it all unfold in silence, as this story seems to be gaining scarily little traction. Right, so the drums of war are beating once again in the Middle East. Benjamin Netanyahu is allegedly preparing for a visit to Washington, D.C., where he is expected to seek Donald Trump's permission for a renewed military campaign against Iran. That comes as little surprise, really. We always knew he was going to do it. He is that desperate these days, isn't he? But this allegation comes at a time when the US Congress is also considering a dangerous new legislative proposal, the Bunker Buster Act, which was introduced on July the 2nd. If passed, this bill would allow the United States to transfer B-2 stealth bombers and GBU-57 bunker-busting bombs to Israel, granting it the capacity to strike Iran's most fortified nuclear sites without American oversight anytime it saw fit to. These developments raise urgent questions about the likelihood of a new, more devastating war between Israel and Iran, the motivations behind these maneuvers, and the consequences that would follow. Netanyahu's upcoming visit is being framed in some outlets, such as the Times of India, as a victory tour to celebrate the joint US-Israeli strikes on Iran in June. However, reports such as that from the Washington Post suggest the trip's primary purpose might be more ominous, that Netanyahu intends to ask Trump for approval to escalate military action against Iran. Certainly, comments made by Defense Minister Israel Katz made a week ago appear to bear this out. An excerpt from the New York Times on that reading, Israel's defense minister said he would pursue a policy of enforcement against Iran, despite a ceasefire, aiming to prevent Tehran from rebuilding its air power, advancing nuclear projects, or developing threatening long-range missiles. The comments by the minister, Israel Katz, to local news channels on Thursday evening suggested that Israel was contemplating more strikes on Iran, even after President Trump announced a truce between the two countries on Tuesday. This move raises critical questions about Israel's geopolitical strategy and its dependence on American support now. Is Netanyahu seeking Trump's blessing because he doubts Israel's capacity to act alone? Or is he looking to share responsibility and shield himself from international condemnation? The truth likely lies somewhere in between, or in both motivations. Netanyahu's long adept at manipulating US domestic politics appears to be leveraging Trump's unpredictable nature, and for as much as Trump likes to claim he is this peacemaker, we have now seen Trump's hawkish instincts at play when he bombed Iran. His strategy reveals both Israel's strategic dependence on US military hardware and political legitimacy. The media framing this as him going to the US to seek Trump's permission, as well as Netanyahu's personal desperation to distract from domestic turmoil, not least that ongoing corruption trial, along with the inherent instability of his coalition. The Bunker Buster Act, also having been called the United States-Israel Strategic Deterrence Act, would authorize the transfer of advanced military technology, including B-2 bombers and 30,000-pound GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, the Bunker Busters, to Israel in the event Iran is deemed to have resumed its nuclear development, all under the fear they're developing nuclear weapons, despite them still being signatories to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Agreement, the NPT, and their nuclear plans having more to do with nuclear energy research and nuclear medicine applications. It must be stopped because, as Netanyahu has been saying for the last 30 years, Iran is just weeks away or months away from a nuclear weapon, despite it never having ever been true. According to sources like the Cradle, the Jerusalem Post, and the Washington Examiner, the bill has bipartisan sponsorship and reflects a growing consensus in Congress that Israel should have autonomous strike capability against Iran's nuclear facilities. It is absolute madness. This bill marks a dramatic escalation in US policy. The B-2 Spirit is one of America's most advanced strategic assets, designed for deep penetration missions in contested airspace. GBU-57, capable of burrowing through 200 feet of concrete, is a weapon designed for annihilating deeply buried targets, like Iran's nuclear site at Fordo. Granting Israel access to these weapons represents a seismic shift in the military balance of the region and signals a chilling new willingness by the US to delegate de facto first strike capability to a foreign power. Such a transfer will not only be unprecedented, but it might also be potentially illegal. The Arms Export Control Act, the AECA, mandates that US weapons exports serve the cause of peace and stability. It's a bit of a laugh in itself, isn't it? But we'll continue. Providing Israel with these weapons for use against Iran, therefore, a country that has not attacked the US or Israel, has merely defended itself against them, therefore risks violating both the AECA and the principles of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty that Iran is signed up to. The NPT obligates signatories to work towards nuclear disarmament and not to support the proliferation of nuclear-related conflict. But Iran being a signatory to this seems utterly irrelevant, and all the more so when nobody defends their rights to peaceful nuclear research under the NPT. Therefore, what is the NPT even worth here? Previous iterations of similar bills, however, have failed in the Senate due to concerns about legal compliance and regional escalation. Yet the current proposal may succeed thanks to an increasingly hawkish Congress, the powerful influence of pro-Israel lobby groups like AIPAC, and the expanding role of defense contractors in shaping foreign policy. This meeting of military mindsets, of military interests, threatens to erode any remaining barriers to open-ended military confrontation between Israel and Iran. The joint US-Israeli attacks on Iran last month targeted the nuclear facilities of Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. Using B-2 bombers and GBU-57s at Fordo, these strikes, according to Israeli and US sources, caused severe damage, setting back Iran's program by 1 or 2 years, according to them. Iran themselves, they reckon they're set back a couple of months, so we'll soon see who is right, won't we? As long as we don't see a return to military action in the meantime. Whatever gains to the US and Israel as they seem to them, though, may prove short-lived. Iran quickly suspended cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA. They barred inspectors from coming to the country, vowed to rebuild their facilities with even greater resilience and secrecy. That they are entitled to their research. They are legally permitted to do it. And they aren't going to bow to the US and Israel over this matter. Furthermore, the human cost was immense too. According to Press TV, over 900 people, including scientists, guards, and civilians, were killed in Israel's attacks. Iran's response included cyber retaliation, missile launches of various types, both new and old, as well as drone strikes. Far from neutralizing the threat, the strikes have intensified. Iran's determination, and of course, you can't ignore the fact that they cut through all of Israel's air defense systems and have caused some $20 billion worth of damage from air bases to the cities of Tel Aviv and Haifa, and yet Netanyahu would start again in a heartbeat, it seems. Netanyahu's enthusiasm for escalation is not simply strategic, we know it is also deeply political. We know he is embattled at home. He sees military confrontation as the go-to tool for rallying nationalist support and distracting from all of his domestic crises. Trump, for his part, clearly thinks he stands to gain politically by aligning with Israel still and portraying himself as a decisive leader against perceived threats, even as aligning himself with Israel is actually becoming increasingly unpopular amongst the US populace, and ignoring the fact that being overtly pro-Israel is what did the Democrats in at the last election and put Trump back into power. This alliance of political convenience is a textbook case of leaders using foreign policy to serve personal agendas. It underscores the dangerous overlap of ego, of ideology and militarism that now drives decision-making in Washington and Tel Aviv. Should Israel attack Iran again, particularly if they've got American-supplied B-2s and bunker busters by that point, the consequences could be absolutely catastrophic, likely dragging many other Middle East nations across the Gulf area into the conflict, as was feared previously, prior to the sudden Trump-instigated ceasefire, which saved Israel from further damage because Iran, despite not being directly involved in those negotiations, simply went along with it in the end. You can criticize Iran for many things, but they came out of that last conflict looking like the adults in the room. It wasn't Israel or the US. It certainly wasn't Netanyahu or Trump. A regional war involving multiple actors, directly or via alleged proxies, Israel literally being a proxy for the West anyway, even though they never get called as such, would strain global supply chains, spike oil prices, and deepen the humanitarian crisis across the Middle East. Civilian casualties could dwarf those of previous wars, and the political fallout would likely destabilize governments in other Middle Eastern states. By considering the transfer of strategic bombers and bunker-busting bombs to Israel, The United States risks confirming its global double standards because, of course, whilst they condemn Russian or Chinese aggression, the US here is willing to arm Israel for preemptive strikes that could provoke a massive regional war. While telling Ukraine there's not enough munitions to go around and that's why they've been short-shrifted now by the US, Israel gets even more. China and Russia have condemned the escalation but are reluctant to directly intervene. The European Union continues to issue cautious statements, much hand-wringing, while failing to enforce any meaningful diplomatic pressure. Global institutions designed to prevent such escalations appear increasingly impotent, their authority further eroded by decades of selective enforcement and manipulation. And yes, I am talking about the United Nations, but they aren't alone. This situation echoes the lead up to the Iraq War, actually, where manipulated intelligence, political ambition, and media complicity combined to unleash a catastrophe. Unlike Iraq, however, Iran is not as isolated or as defenseless. It has regional allies, advanced missile technology, and a more resilient political structure than they were ever given credit for. Under President Obama, tensions with Iran were diffused through the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA. Under Trump in his first term, that got binned, leading to where we are today, in no small part in his second term, and with Netanyahu more desperate and more dangerous than ever. Diplomacy has been replaced by assassination, sabotage, and open warfare. The assassination of Iranian scientists, cyber attacks on infrastructure, and now the threat of further bunker-busting strikes all point to a strategy of provocation by Israel on Iran. Israel appear to be goading Iran into retaliating again, thus justifying further escalation. Well, it didn't work last time. Iran have only ever retaliated after being attacked first. The world saw that. The media didn't fool us. And if things kick off again, we will know again who really started it. The use of conventional weapons to attack nuclear facilities set a dangerous precedent as it was. Illegal as it is under Article 56 of the Additional Protocols of the Geneva Conventions, nuclear sites are protected. Without enforcement comes impunity. And that impunity, in the form of strikes on nuclear research sites, blurs the lines between conventional and nuclear warfare and creates new norms that may be adopted by other states. Iran, cornered and under siege, may accelerate its nuclear program, not out of aggression, but as a deterrent against future strikes. Now, this raises uncomfortable questions, therefore. Is Iran genuinely seeking a nuclear weapon? No evidence for this exists at all. Or is it going to be inevitably driven to that conclusion by Israeli and US aggression? And if Iran does resume enrichment, as they say they're going to, what mechanism remains to stop further escalation? The defense industry on both sides of the Atlantic stands to gain immensely from continued hostilities. Israeli defense contractors, American arms manufacturers, and their lobbying arms have lobbied aggressively for the Bunker Buster Act. For them, war is not a last resort, but a lucrative opportunity. The role of disinformation also looms large. Pro-Israel media outlets, social media manipulation, and selective reporting have all helped frame the conflict as one of defense rather than aggression. Meanwhile, voices of dissent, journalists, academics, activists get sidelined or silenced. The machinery of war includes not only bombs and missiles, but narratives and propaganda, especially when it comes to Israel, Hasbara. Transferring B-2 bombers and bunker busters to Israel may also violate international law, yet there's no functioning mechanism to hold violators accountable here. The International Criminal Court, the ICC, has very limited jurisdiction here, if any, neither the US or Israel being signatories. The UN Security Council is paralysed by vetoes, again coming from the US. The world is entering an era of lawlessness where power, not principle, determines legitimacy, no matter how illegitimate it might actually be. Netanyahu's planned Washington visit, Trump's potential support for further escalation, and the looming passage of the Bunker Buster Act represent a perfect storm of recklessness, and we can choose to either confront this spiral into chaos or to be complicit through silence and inaction. With Netanyahu, it always seems to be the case that it is not whether another war will occur, it is when, how, and how devastating this one will be. His attacks on Iran are built on lies, as they always have been for the last 30 years, because he is a madman. If war between Israel and Iran resumes, it won't actually be the first time Netanyahu tried to attempt this, though, since the ceasefire. As this poorly covered story got covered by me the other day in this video recommendation here, as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share, and subscribe if you haven't done so already, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, but as spreading the word and helping support the channel at the same time, which is very much appreciated, holding power to account for ordinary or working class people, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.